Good enough to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. All right. Now, first up, we have some recognition today. We have the Fairfield Ludlow High School 2014 girls tennis team that are FCAC, Fairfield County Interscholastic Athletic Conference, and state champions. Yes. Ladies, if we could ask you to come up, we have a handout for you up here. Chris and Kevin, if you kind of go this way. And then, can we ask the coach, would you mind giving us a few descriptive words on your season and some of the challenges that you've been through?
Sure. Our challenges were that we were the reigning FCAC champions and state runners-up from last year, and we knew that everybody out there in the league was going to come and give us their best. I told the girls to be ready for every team's best, and they far surpassed what I thought we could have done. We went out there and won practically every game in the regular season, went 17-1. Darien gave us a little loss at the end of the season, but what better way to win a state championship than turning the tables and beating Darien in the state finals 4-3, reversing the score in the regular season. So in a quick nutshell, that was the remarkable season. We had repeat FCAC champions and first-time Class L state champions for Ludlow High School.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Just briefly, Ludlow's had a long tradition of being good in tennis. I mean, going back to the day when, I'm a Ludlow alum, going back to the day when I was there, both the men's and women's tennis teams were very good, and I remember our men's team battling for the state championship my senior year.
Yes, my background's from Massachusetts. So back when the school split, I think 85, 86 time period, I don't know as much about their past successes. I do have some friends on staff that have shared with me some of the glory days of Fairfield sports when the two schools battled. I've been teaching 22 years, coaching 16 years of tennis, so I've been certainly a big part of the more recent tennis history in the town of Fairfield, coaching both the combined high school teams and at this point now 10 years as the one and only Ludlow girls varsity coach. So yeah, Ludlow tennis has been alive and well in the past. I'm not as up to date on past history, but we're really happy about writing new history for us.
Fantastic. Would any of your team like to say a few words at all?
We got our co-captain right behind me, senior. If she'd like to say a few words.
I'm just really excited.
If you could stand closer to the mic so we can see you blush.
I'm Chelsea Keene. I'm a senior. I played #1 doubles. I'm just really excited that we could take the state championship my senior year. My last year playing tennis, it was really actually an honor. So, yep.
Well, congratulations, ladies. It's a fantastic job. Now we have certificates for each of you. And why don't I open these up? Oh, we got more. There are more. Kristen, Kevin, what I'm going to do is opens up to Kristen, make your announcement.
Sure. And this is to the coach, to Mr. Reeser, and forgive me if I'm saying your name
That's okay.
incorrectly.
It's correct in Rhode Island. Reserve or riser.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm fighting a cold, ladies, so I'm not going to shake anybody's hand. Sure. Here we go.
And Cami Adagian, did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Good job.
And Kyra Adagian. Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations. Good job.
Lexi Brown.
Not here.
No? Okay.
Lexi.
Julia Chung. Julia, congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Daria Efimov, I think I said that incorrectly. How do you say Efimov? Efimov. Congratulations.
Congratulations to you. Good job.
Lindsay Evans. Congratulations, Lindsay.
Congratulations to you.
Danielle Fox. Congratulations, Danielle.
Congratulations. Good job.
Olivia Julian.
Not here.
Not here, okay. And Lauren Hilliker. Congratulations, Lauren.
Congratulations, Lauren.
Sarah Jennings. Congratulations, Sarah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Chelsea Keane. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Jim.
Maddie Leverty. There she is. Congratulations, Maddie.
Congratulations, Jim.
And Anna Wyckoff. Not here also, okay. Pass this along to you.
Coach.
Wow.
Ladies, again, on behalf of the town of Fairfield, formally, congratulations on your great success, and thank you for making us so proud of you.
Thank you.
Did they get the pictures that they want? Did everyone get the pictures that they want? Do you want the group up front?
Yeah.
Come on up front, ladies. Come on over. Squeeze in there. Let me get out of your way. Thank you, guys. Put a couple in front. They might put a couple in front if that helps. Squeeze in there.
Wait. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Do it? All right, guys, thank you.
Good
Good
job.
luck next year. Next up on our agenda,
Oh, there's Mr. Hatzis. Thank you.
next up on our agenda is a resignation from the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission. Virginia Casey, Democrat from 210 James Street, resigned recently, and her term goes from 11/10 to 11/14, so we have an opening on solid waste and recycling. Then, as our tradition, we've had a number of reports or updates to the board on different topics, and Richard DeAngelis, who most recently we've recognized for his great work at the Senior Center and on the Top 10 Committee in identifying areas for improvement down there, has another specialty, and we're going to hear a report on former President George Washington and the Sun Tavern. Mr. DeAngelis.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have something to give you each. It's not a lot, not a little homework,
Thank you.
but it's a synopsis of an essay I've been working on, the first few pages, and then
Thank you.
there's 5 pages in there.
Well, if I could ask you to speak from the podium, just because the mic is set up there so that everybody can hear you at home.
Appended to the essay, there are 5 pages from George Washington's diary, that portion of his diary that deals with his travels from New York to New Haven on the trip when he stopped here in Fairfield. Okay? Now it seems that every year or every few years, around the 4th of July, there's a discussion or an article written here or there, did Washington stay at the Sun Tavern? Did he stay in Fairfield? Well, we know he stayed in Fairfield because he did tell us that. The question is, where did he stay? Where did George Washington dine and stay? I believe that the Washington diaries and existing accounts support the Sun Tavern as the most logical site for his stay here. And what I'm going to do is briefly read to you a synopsis of that abstract of the essay, so it's only a couple of pages. But it gives you that aspect of George Washington in his diaries, which is really, it's forensic evidence of the man's personality and the way he lived his life. So, in the fall of 1789, George Washington, the first president of the United States of America, toured New England states to observe conditions there. The president traveled by coach, accompanied by Major Jackson, Tobias Lear, who was acting secretary for him, 6 servants, and extra horses. According to Washington's diaries, the party arrived in Fairfield in the afternoon of October 16th, 1789, quote, where we dined and lodged, end quote. This vague reference prompts the question, where did George dine and lodge? Analysis of his diaries reveal a fastidious and methodical man who began his day's activities at dawn, then ate breakfast in mid-morning, a routine he followed when traveling as well. He preferred inns owned by former veterans or their widows and families, whose names he usually recorded. The diary for Friday the 16th states, and this is a quote from the diaries coming here, about 7 o'clock, we left the widow Haviland's. The widow was a revolutionary wife, the wife of a revolutionary general. The widow Haviland's, and after passing Horseneck, Greenwich, 6 miles distant from Rye, the road, which is hilly and immensely stony and trying to wheels and carriages, we breakfasted at Stamford, which is 6 miles further, at one Webb's, a tolerable good house, but not equal in appearance or reality to Haviland's. At Norwalk, which is 10 further miles, we made a halt to feed our horses. To the lower end of the town, sea vessels come, and at the other end are mills, stores, and an Episcopal and Presbyterian church. From hence to Fairfield, where we dined and lodged, is 12 miles, and part of it very rough road, but not equal to that through Horseneck. That's the end of the quote there. To travel 33 miles over difficult roads, we may assume an estimated speed of 3 to 4 miles per hour. With stops for meals and tending horses, it must have taken 10 or 11 hours to reach Fairfield in late afternoon, as dusk approached the president. The president wrote, again, quote, the superb landscape, however, which is to be seen from the meeting house of the latter is a rich regalia. We found all the farmers busily employed in gathering, grinding, and expressing the juice from their apples, the crop of which they say is rather above mediocrity. The average crop of wheat they had is about 15 bushels to the acre from their fallow land, and 20 or 25 from other. The destructive evidence of British cruelty are yet visible both in Norwalk and Fairfield, as there are the chimneys of many burnt houses standing in them yet. The principal export from Norwalk and Fairfield is horses and cattle, salted beef and pork, lumber and Indian corn to the West Indies, and in a small degree, wheat and flour, end quote. George tells us again that on Saturday the 17th, a little after sunrise, we left Fairfield, and passing through East Fairfield, which is now Bridgeport, breakfast at Stratford, which is 10 miles from Fairfield. Now you get an idea of the details, because this is his younger life. He was a surveyor, and when he surveyed land that people were interested in buying, he would tell them what kind of trees and hardwoods it had, what the land was like, what the terrain was like, whether it could flood, whether it would maintain crops, and so on. So he was very, very meticulous in his descriptions of things. His penchant for detail, the diary mentions no prearranged hospitality for Fairfield, which suggests that he hoped to make the ferry crossing to Stratford that day, and the stop in Fairfield was unplanned and opens the possibility of an impromptu stay at a private residence. Now, there are a number of speculations over the years that have been offered about where he stayed. I'm going to look at some of those. So where did he dine and lodge? One view is that he stayed at the home of Thaddeus Burr, where he had been hosted in 1775. But the Burr homestead had been burned by the British, and its reconstruction was not completed until 1795. Clearly, the Burrs were not hosting presidents. Might he have stayed with the Reverend Andrew Elliott, pastor of the First Congregational Church, a former pastor at that point? Elliott, a prolific writer, mentions no such event. Surely, if he did, George's diary would say so. Would he have stayed with General Gold Silliman, who lived 2 miles north of the Green up on what is now Jennings Road? That house is still there. General Silliman was very ill at the time and died a few months later. Would Washington impose himself on a widow tending a dying husband? Had Washington stayed in any private home in Fairfield, his diary would have graciously recognized their hospitality as it did in so many instances. This leaves the public houses. Fairfield had several taverns prior to the British burning, The Bulkley Tavern was located near the old burial ground on what is now Beach Road. The Bulkleys were known loyalists, and the wife of the owner was the sister of General Tryon's officer who guided the British troops into the town. According to accounts, Tryon used the tavern as a headquarters, and the Bulkley properties were spared from the torch. After the British withdrew, incensed townsfolk shot up the tavern and set it on fire. The extent of the damage is unclear. Records are unclear. Some records don't even show a Bulkley Tavern after the burning. But let us assume that it had been rehabilitated and was in usable condition at the time of Washington's visit. So it's a choice now between two taverns. The home of Samuel Penfield, a Revolutionary War officer, was located near the town hall, and he had also been burned by the British. Penfield rebuilt his property promptly as an inn and opened it in 1782 as the Sun Tavern, an up-to-date ordinary, that's a term they use for, it's a place where travelers could expect to find lodging and a set meal open to the public. Colonial law required that all larger towns have an ordinary. The Sun Tavern became a very popular place. That Washington did not mention the Penfield name or the Sun Tavern may be because Sam Penfield himself was not present at the site, and it's reasonable to assume that he had employees to manage the tavern. Sam Penfield had a number of business interests, as you know from the Penfield name. He had many business interests in town. And if Washington hadn't made prearrangements and was not planning to stay in Fairfield, that would explain why he didn't make those arrangements. Apparently, I don't think he understood, or his people realized, how difficult the roads would be. They had a terrible time on the roads with the carts. Several times George had to get out of the coach and ride a horse because the road was so bad the wheels couldn't take the load. Which choice would Washington have made? Would he have stayed at the older Bulkley Tavern, tainted with the legacy of having been General Tryon's headquarters? Or would he have chosen the newer Sun Tavern, owned by a Patriot veteran, which was frequented by George's finest to accommodate his party? Not fair, but frequented by Fairfield's finest to accommodate his party. I spent many hours discussing this with Billy, the former town historian emeritus, and he consulted with experts when he oversaw the preservation of the Sun Tavern back, I think it was in 1978, at the time that the town acquired the property from the Historical Society. Now, historical investigation allows for some intelligent supposition in search of difficult but reasonable conclusions, lacking any evidence that George Washington stayed anywhere else the night of October 16, 1789. And I and many others have worn out some of the documents in the town Historical Society. I believe we are justified in accepting the Sun Tavern as the logical site of Washington's visit until someone proves otherwise. In support of this forensic argument presented, we have the factual statement of Frank Samuel Child, and this is interesting. He was president of the Fairfield Historical Society in 1909. He wrote in a book titled Fairfield, Ancient and Modern. He wrote, Washington was entertained at this interesting hostelry on his last visit to town. The Sun Tavern, kept by Mr. Penfield, stood at the south edge of the green. Here the citizens gathered to do honor to the president. He spent the night in this place and pursued his journey to New Haven in the morning. Now, I don't know where the notion comes from that he didn't stay there, because there was a marker in 1932, on the record show, there was a marker right in front of the first church that Washington had stayed there, and there used to be a marker in front of the Sun Tavern that said that Washington stayed there. There's no logical other place where he would have stayed. At that point, there wasn't. He talks about he could see Fairfield from the meeting house, which, of course, Washington used the term meeting house always for congregational churches. Other churches, he referred to them as Episcopal or Presbyterian or whatever, but always meeting house. It's often used, the meeting house, as meeting house. Some people have thought that the meeting house was the town hall, the old town hall. The old town hall hadn't been rebuilt yet when George Washington came here. So he wasn't there. He was at the meeting house across the street. So I think with the lack of any evidence to the contrary, I think the town is really safe to say George Washington stayed here, and he stayed at the Sun Tavern until someone else proves otherwise. And you people can do that.
Dr. DeAngelis, thank you very much for that research. I think that's a great presentation, especially in honor of our 375th anniversary,
Absolutely.
proving that George Washington was one of the several presidents that have visited Fairfield.
Yes.
And certainly did that night. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any comments or thoughts?
Please, go ahead.
I thank you also, and I particularly enjoyed hearing about the roads, which is something we still talk about today, so that was very funny.
They're a lot better today than they were then.
You
Well,
bet.
Yes,
You bet.
opinions are mixed on that, I guess, but
Right,
thank you for your research, and it is fitting this year in particular.
Dr. DeAngelis, thank you very much for coming here today and sharing this fascinating history about George Washington and our town and the Sun Tavern. I mean, you make more than a great case for where he stayed. And we're very proud to have the president having stayed there at the Sun Tavern, and thank you for all your work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, all right, next up, to hear a report from the Audubon Society.
It's good stuff, huh?
Mr. North, good to see you.
Good to see
You
you.
just give us your full name and let
Yeah,
the folks at home know who you are.
Nelson North, Director of Fairfield Operations for the Connecticut Audubon Society. And pleased to be here. Thank you. I thought you might be interested in some of the history of Audubon, just to give you a broad overview. And then I brought one of my associates, teacher naturalist Colleen Noyes, who can talk to you a little bit in detail about the CANE program, which is something where we're partnered with the town of Fairfield on.
Oh, great, thank you.
So, basically, and it's fascinating, actually. In 1898, the Connecticut Audubon Society was founded right here in Fairfield. And it was founded here, and many Audubon societies were being founded at that time, as a response to the wholesale slaughter of birds because their plumage, their feathers, was being used in the millinery trade. And there was a real pushback against this. So the Audubon Society, it was actually called the Audubon Society of Connecticut in the original documents. What's fascinating is that in 1898, when they elected the first president was Mabel Osgood Wright, a woman who in 1898 couldn't vote for president, but she was elected president of the Connecticut Audubon Society, which is kind of cool. She was a noted author. She grew up in New York City, summered at her family's home, which is where Mosswood Condominiums is now. She married, and they built a home on that site, and she taught. She taught conservation, early conservation, obviously, and birdcraft, the love and care of birds. So she was elected president in 1898, and one of the folks in that original group was another Fairfield lady named Annie Burr Jennings. And without Annie B., there wouldn't be a birdcraft, because Annie B. said to Mabel, you pick a site, and we're going to create a songbird sanctuary, and we're going to build a museum, which was really pretty cool. Annie B. owned a lot of land in Fairfield. So the 12 acres, the original 12-acre birdcraft sanctuary, Mabel picked because it was within walking distance of the train station, the idea being that folks could come out from the city on the train on a weekend and walk through a sanctuary and go through a museum. In the museum, and we're in the process of having these pieces restored up at the Hartford Athenaeum, but the museum originally consisted of large painted canvases with mounted birds and brush, leaves, branches, sand, dirt, all incorporated to create dioramas of Connecticut's various habitats. So you had a seashore habitat, a salt marsh habitat, a hardwood habitat, an upland grassland habitat. Because remember, in 1898 and 1914, when the museum actually opened, this is our 100th anniversary, Connecticut was pretty well cleaned out of trees. It was a dairy state. The trees had been cut down to make fields for dairies. The trees had been cut to create charcoal for smelting of tungsten and bog ore. You didn't have the forests and the parks and what we call open space that we have now. So it's really pretty cool that she got this land and she kept it as a songbird sanctuary. It is, in fact, the oldest songbird sanctuary in the United States, regardless of what our friends at Sagamore Hill say. We have letters between Mabel and Edith Roosevelt, and we were first. They were second. So that's kind of a neat thing for the town of Fairfield, to have the oldest songbird sanctuary in the United States. The museum opened on October 16th, 1914, which is not only, as I say, our 100th anniversary, but interesting enough, tragically enough, it was the same year that the last passenger pigeon died. The bird died in Cincinnati Zoo in 1914, the last passenger pigeon. Basically went extinct due to absolutely obscene market hunting and the loss of natural habitat, chestnut and oak trees, which there used to be a lot of in the United States, and there aren't anymore. Mabel Osgood Wright continued to write. She continued to teach, and we still have some of her portable dioramas. I refer to them as the PowerPoints of 1914. And they're very heavy wooden cases, glass fronts, and in each case she'll have a collection of owls or a collection of hawks or a collection of warblers or what have you. And these she had lugged out to the schools on a buckboard, probably two very strong men. I've tried to pick these guys up, they're heavy. And that's what she taught the kids about. It was kind of neat. We still have them. Anyway, Mabel died in the 1930s. She had built a caretaker cottage on the place, which was the residence of a fellow named Frank Novak. And I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember Mr. Novak, but he died in the late 60s, early 70s. But he was the caretaker there, and he did many of the mounts, and he led trips, and he talked. He was quite a character. We got whacked in 1956. In 1956, the Interstate Highway Act was passed. And George Washington would find a much more comfortable ride coming through now, but it took half of the sanctuary. It took 6 of the 12 acres. So now we are a 6-acre sanctuary with I-95 running through the north side. That was the bad news. The good news was that it encouraged another Fairfield family, Roy and Margot Larson of Time Inc. fame, to put together 152 acres up in the north end of Fairfield. The address is 2325 Burr Street. Those 152 acres, along with a building with 5 classrooms, they presented to us in 1971. So between the museum and the reception center at Birdcraft and the facility up at Burr Street, we have a total of about 7 classrooms that are available for everything from children to adult lectures and what have you. The original Board of Governors, which sat at Audubon on Uncle Road, now had competition, if you will, from a new board, a new center up at Burr Street. And that didn't work. So in 1998, the two boards were merged together into one board with myself as the director and a team of about 18 people that run it. In 2007, we were very fortunate to receive, as you probably know, a gift of $1 million from Lucy Bedford Warren. And that was specifically for the rebuilding of the museum. The original museum, as you can imagine, built in 1914 with 2 small additions on its wings added later, had really sort of, let's say it had gotten pretty awful. It had sagged, it bowed, it leaked, it had infestation, it needed a lot of work, it was nowhere near code. So we took the money, we rebuilt the shell, we have stabilized it, we have finished what we call phase 1. It's up to code, it's going to last the next 100 years. And we're now getting ready to launch phase 2, which will be furbishing it with exhibitry, which will not only, this is the tricky part, not only honor our heritage and past, but also provide us with a 21st century classroom for the kids that are coming through today that, you know, aren't going to be looking for the same things that kids looked at 100 years ago. Because so much of what we do is what we call science-based education, conservation education with a science base. I've asked Colleen Noyes, come on up, yeah, who is a teacher naturalist, And she is in charge of administering the CANE program, which is the program that you give us money for every year to present and to educate the lower grades in Fairfield. So, Colleen, if you want to add to what I said?
Sure.
Thank you.
May I call you Shirley?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Sure.
I just wanted to say, my name is Colleen Noyes, and I am a teacher naturalist at Connecticut Audubon. I would also like to state congratulations to the Fairfield, the tennis team. I personally was cut in my freshman year, and I'm still a little bitter about it. But I'm happy to say that these girls have done so well. True story. So I had an unorthodox backhand, apparently. So CANE stands for Connecticut Audubon Nature Explorers. And I am the manager of that program, and it is a lot of fun. It is daunting in many ways. I have talked to my volunteers, and I call it, it's literally a leap of faith. And what we do, it is a year-long program for every single kindergartner, first grader, and second grader here in Fairfield, including, so that's Burr, Dwight, Holland Hill, Jennings, McKinley, Mill Hill, North Stratfield, Osborne Hill, Riverfield, Sherman, Stratfield, and St. Thomas. We do serve approximately 2,400 students, and I am the coordinator for that. And how it works is that I train parent volunteers, and these are moms and dads, working moms and dads who take time out of their day, and there are 3 coordinators for, depending upon how many classes there are in each school. Every year it's different. There are approximately 36 coordinators, and I disseminate information to them, including lesson plans, materials. I train them, and they in turn have a group of volunteers that they are in charge of that go to the open houses in September and October. They kind of sell the program to the moms and dads. They sign up, not always knowing what they're in for. And we get a new crop every single year. It's great to see the faces of the kindergarten parents. And then when they talk to the second grade parents who have already experienced it and tell them that, yes, you can do this. And so it is, there are over 300 volunteers that all the information that I give to is disseminated to. So it's really, it's a leap of faith, and it's really an incredible program. Our curriculum, each grade, kindergarten, first and second grade, they have 3 programs per year, 1 in the fall, 1 in the winter, and 1 in the spring. And that includes, the parents do teach all of this. They come to training, and I teach them what to do. We have a system of handing out the bins, puppet theaters, materials, fish traps, nets, everything you can think of, depending upon what habitat they are going to be teaching or learning about. Some of the topics that we cover in the curriculum are weather, habitats, food chains, adaptations, wetlands, ecosystems, saltwater tank monitoring and putting together, gathering of the materials, migration, hibernation, marine biology. We touch on soil, birds, mammals, insects, fish, reptiles, water, seeds, invertebrates, plants, amphibians, grasses, rocks, and so much more that I can't even think about right now. Some of the methods that we use, that I teach them, the kids are reading, they're exploring, they're role-playing, they measure, they excavate, they do scientific inquiry, they collect data, they count, they map, and more. There's really so much involved in this that you can't really even, quantify or qualify it. And I think what's really unique about, let me just say, when I first I've been working for Audubon for almost 19 years, and I was in Milford for about 15 of those years. When I came to Fairfield, and I was being kind of trained for this naturalist position here, the person that I replaced sat me down one day after a month and said, "Now we're going to talk about CANE." and I was a little frightened. But it has really, been a lot of fun. But what is really unique about CANE are the volunteers. And it's the dedicated parents, the moms and dads, who show up for the training, who study and learn about things that they're not used to. You're a businessman, or you've got an accountant, or a chef or someone, and they look at me when I'm training. I laugh because I see the fear in their eyes. It's not easy to. It is, but it isn't. I tell them, when you're done, you're done. Leave. You're done with the lesson. Don't stand there. Don't let them know. Don't let them smell the fear. But what they learn about this new material, and I think they're modeling what it is to be a teacher outside of the home, and that they can be their students. They're learning and they're teaching their own children, and the kids love to see them. They love their moms and dads in the classroom. So I wanted to read you an unsolicited letter, because one of the parents said to me, I would like her to write a letter to someone this year. Her last child's in the 2nd grade, so she will not be involved in the Kane program anymore. And I said, yeah, let it rip, good, the bad, and the ugly. And this is what she wrote to our president, to Nelson North, and to Ralph Wood, the chairman of our board. My family has enjoyed the programs and grounds of the Fairfield Audubon since we moved to Fairfield in 2010. During that same time, I have volunteered for many activities at Roger Sherman Elementary, where my children attend school. Volunteering for the Audubon's Kane program has been a particularly rewarding volunteer experience for me. As my youngest son is finishing 2nd grade and my time with Kane has come to a close, I wanted to take this opportunity to let you all know what a worthwhile enrichment program Kane is for the students. The children's enthusiasm is obvious during the Kane sessions in the classroom and at the beach. They clearly enjoy it and learn from it, not to mention love discovering crabs in the muddy sand. My 2 sons in 2nd and 4th grade still reference information taught during the 1st grade Kane programs about birds and bird beak adaptations. As a parent, it is wonderful to spend my volunteer time learning as well. Colleen is a fantastic teacher and is always welcoming and approachable. She is so full of knowledge and other things, and shares many wonderful facts about nature, birds, and sea life. The parent volunteers wish we could bring her along when it is time to teach the students. Many thanks to you and all of the folks at the Audubon who helped to provide the exceptional learning opportunities offered to our students through the Kane program. Our family looks forward to continuing our support of Audubon, and so on. Best wishes. So I think that kind of summed it up. We do our best, and we hope that we can continue to provide this opportunity for the town of Fairfield. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Just to kind of set this up, one of the things that we've been trying to do, especially for some of the organizations that the town funds during our annual budget process, is bring them back through the Board of Selectmen meeting so we have a chance to hear from them on all the good work they do away from the budget process.
That's right.
To hopefully provide a better understanding of the impact on our community and on our residents. And I'm looking at this, and I've had a chance to tour some of the construction going on at the Birdcraft Museum, so that's just very exciting work that's taking place there. And it's just amazing that 2,400 students get touched by your programs each year. Not to mention, as I've talked to a few Eagle Scouts over time, it seems like there's a number of Eagle Scout opportunities that you're able to generate and help these young men get through their Eagle Scout.
We probably run a half dozen Eagle Scout projects a year in those sanctuaries. Everything from rebuilding the elevated walkways, clearing trails, blazing new trails,
Bird boxes.
bird boxes. It goes on and on and on. It's just, boy,
Bridges.
we love Eagle Scouts.
Display.
And then,
ongoing.
just looking at some of the things that you mentioned that again, I think we're just not aware of. I mean, here we are again, and I'm more sensitive to this year because it's our 375th anniversary. It's your 100th anniversary, and the fact that Audubon, was started here in
Right.
Fairfield.
Right here.
Is
Yeah.
just something that...
2 ladies, right here.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
That's my takeaway for the day.
Absolutely. No.
Colleagues, anything you care to add or thoughts or questions?
Well, thank you so much for being here. I was wondering about the adaptations. I've taught that lesson myself, so I'm glad to hear that it's a very fun one. And I think that you actually have people here at the table who are very familiar with Kane. It's a phenomenal program, and
Yes.
I am so glad that we bring that out. It's true. My children have also been through it and remember those lessons.
Right.
And it's also true that it brings the parents and the community together and out into the woods and to see the birds, literally.
Right.
That's actually my question, is in terms of the sanctuary, is anything happening in terms of renovations outside, or is it just the building itself?
That's a good question. There's a constant ongoing sanctuary maintenance program, okay? Invasive species, Japanese knotweed, the rest of them are just, they're almost native species now, there's so much of it. We were very fortunate this year in that the Sasquatch Garden Club chose to partner with us on redoing the landscaping and the planting in the apron, if you will, of the Birdcraft Museum. So we did the hardscaping. They're doing the landscaping, the planting, and the soft part. And they put quite a lot of money into this and more behind it, because what it becomes is it becomes an extension of the museum. As you exit the museum, it becomes an outdoor classroom.
Right.
The plants are all labeled, the pathway is there, the plants are all native indigenous species, and the idea is that you as a homeowner walk out and say, I could do this in my backyard. So that was, you know, I mean, that would, and hopefully more things like that will happen, but yeah. In addition, we have fields that we mow, we have paths that we keep open.
Well, I asked
Yeah.
that in part. Something you said struck me is that as you redo the museum, kids experience things differently, and there's a lot more of, you know, these electronic
is.
devices, all that. But what's the same is going outdoors.
Yes.
And having gone with classes through the sanctuary, that's something I hope that will continue, that we get our kids outside also,
the-
which I'm glad to hear
The
is
big
still
piece
happening.
there, Chris, and I've got actually another educator in the room who I think some of you know. When you take the kids out into the sanctuary, there are no cell phones, there's no
Yeah.
computer-driven this or that. It's the trees, it's the birds, it's the stream, and that's where it becomes up to the educator to make this come alive. And you know yourself, when you've had a really great tour guide or a great docent, you go away with so much more. And that's why when you get really great volunteers, I mean, we're very lucky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal.
It's great stuff.
Mr. Kiley?
First, congratulations on your anniversary. I did not know that. That is great news. And I want to thank you both for being here. It's great to get an update from your organization, because like Mike mentioned, you know, once a year we have the budget process and we learn a little bit about what everyone is doing, but it's part of the budget process. This is more personal. You get to come and explain to us how great your Kane organization program is running and the other things that you're doing for our children and for our town. And it's just, it's valued information for us, and it just makes our partnership with you stronger going forward. So thank you very much for that. And I also want to thank you for the education that you're providing to our children and the awareness that you're creating amongst our citizens in town. So it's great news. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And again, just one final point that came out as you were talking, and you talked about how around the turn of the century, feathers were big in the fashion industry, and not I'm the most fashionable guy around, but I was taking a tour on the coast of Maine, and we visited the puffins and how they're making
Yeah.
a comeback,
Yeah.
because they were almost wiped out
Yep.
around the turn of the century because of the fashion industry.
That's right.
That was just literally plucking them dry.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you again. Congratulations on your 100th anniversary.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks
Nice
for
job.
having us.
Thank you.
You want to mention, you sure? Okay. She's leaving now, so you don't have any
Oh.
chance.
Oh,
Right.
man.
She's a fair weather.
All right. All right, next up, to hear a report from the Mill River Wetland Committee. Hi. Would you come up to the podium and
I'm Charlene Braun-Schindler. I'm
Yes.
president of the board of the Mill River Wetland Committee, and...
thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for having us and being here. My speech isn't like 5 minutes at all. It seems to be shorter, but I can add a lot to it that, after listening, if you take a lot of what the Audubon said,
Yeah.
we are very similar, and our program, to put a little point in here, we started first, not to be obnoxious or anything, but it's a good program, because now that we started with 3rd through 6th grade, and then the Audubon through K through 2nd is a good complementary mix and partnership, and so it's good that and we work similarly. And I just wanted to start off with okay, everything organized. Our statement, the Mill River Wetland Committee statement is the terrestrial earth is divided into river drainage basins. The diversity and abundance of life forms on earth depend on the integrity and viability of the natural systems in each basin. These systems are frequently threatened by human activity. And our statement of purpose is the Mill River Wetland Committee is to strengthen environmental science education and develop general public understanding of river basin systems. So we concentrate on river basins, also known as watersheds, and give them the whole, by the time they're, I'll read from here and then I can ad-lib later. The Mill River Wetland Committee conducts the Riverland program, which is, that's how we're connected. River Lab program is what we help produce, is a unique hands-on, inquiry-based, award-winning environmental science educational program to the students in the Fairfield Public and all the parochial schools in town. So it's all of our elementary and the middle schools in Fairfield. It began when Joy Shaw approached Vin Ansno in the Mill Hill School. He was the Mill Hill School principal at the time in 1967. And she saw a need for introducing the students to rivers, to waters, why they're important. And so she asked if she could teach a class for the year and all from K through 6 on the river, take the kids down to the river and introduce them to it. And he said, yes, that would be a great idea. She had the help of Pat Morris, who recruited 8 other guides that Joy trained, and they had a successful year taking all these different classes down to the Mill River, rather. And they approached the Board of Education that summer of 1968, and the board was very enthusiastic and brought in the Mill River program, as she called it, the Mill River Lab program at that time. And that was when the first trips, the 1968-1969 season, when all the schools in Fairfield were part of a new program, science curriculum, that I think was the very first one to be in all the school system. And something that was standard, not just every school doing whatever science they wanted. So that's how we started, and we have grown. We just completed our 45th year of our River Lab programs, and we have gone through some changes in the time, because as more science comes in, the CMTs came in the early 2000s. We were really lucky that our curriculum fit the curriculum of the CMTs, what they were asking for each grade level. So all we had to do was tweak what we were teaching, make them more scientific, inquiry-based in the classroom. All of our materials, and give more hands-on experiments, and also what we did out in the study trips to give them more inquiry-based. And that little wow, aha moments is what they're looking for, is showing them something and they have to come up with the answer for it. So all of our material we have created is all proprietary, it's copyrighted. We have developed all of the teacher materials, all their lesson plans. It's a 6-week course for each grade level through 6. We have produced all the student materials. We have produced all the experiments that are done within the classroom, and also provided them the materials to do these experiments with. We are also okay, I'll go on to the study trips. I'll skip this other part. Our other unique part about our program is our study trips, which the cane goes out and has things in the school and outside. We developed a program that the outside, to take them out to see everything that goes on, what they're doing hands-on in the classroom, come out and have an hour and a half what we call study trip, because they're learning the whole time they're out there. It's just not a field trip and having fun. They're having fun, but they're learning at the same time more. And so we have developed for each grade level a study trip that coordinates everything they're learning. It enhances what they're learning in the classroom. And it's just really amazing to see their faces light up when they are, third grade is the river basin system, so their third graders are learning what is above the ground in a river basin system. Fourth grades are learning the precipitation, the groundwater system, and how they all connect to make everything work. Fifth grade is out in the spring and they're doing reproduction. They're seeing what plants are coming out, what animals are coming out, what is where, how they exist, why they're there. And we talk about the invasives, like they do in the Audubon, and why they're so bad for our native plants, why they are taking over, what is the problem with that. And then also, in the sixth grade, we'd take them out for estuary. It's a great program. We had retweaked that one a couple of years ago, and we just retweaked it this summer for this winter, and we're going to rewrite it up for the outdoor part of it, not the indoor part. It's just taking them on a study trip to make it even better. So all of these components work together, and our guides are the main point, that we're not just in the classroom, in the school. We're not just, our education isn't just involved with just schools. We are also the community. We have our volunteers, just as the Audubon does. They're recruited in the classrooms. They're parents, they're grandparents that come in. They're people that are friends of people in schools, or just people in the community that like it. We have guides that are now guides that went through the River Lab program previously, and that number is growing, which is really fun to see. And one is Tricia Money, which some of you might know, and she is she came right on board when her first started, so she's been involved for 11 years and very actively involved. And then there's ones that don't, like me, I don't even have any kids in the school anymore. And we stay on because we love to guide. We love to see what happens with the students and what they're learning and how they're learning it. And we give awards, and the people stay on. We had this year, we had 608 volunteers this year.
Wow.
And that's, our calendar year goes regular calendar year, January to December. And that's a good number. We've been increasing. For the last 5 years, we've increased our guide corps tremendously, and we recruit our guides just the same way. We started, who knows who started first, but we have our captain. We call them captains at the schools, and now each grade level has their own captain, and recruiting from within their own classes. And so we've got all the schools, and then from there, they've been recruiting. We ask them to have at least, depending on the size of their class, if they have 20 kids in their class, we're expecting 5 guides from that class, so that we can have 4, no more than 5 kids in a small group, because each class goes out by itself, and not within, except for 6th grade, they go out as a school, and we divide them up into groups of 30 people, and they have like 4 or 5 guides. Yeah, oh, I thought you wanted to say something. And so it's been really good. We just finished our 5th grade, and so starting the new year calendar, we had 175 5th grade parents come out this year. Last year we had 138. So it's really good for us to. So we're involved. Everything that happens is the whole community gets what is involved with this. They're learning, like the gentleman said at the Audubon, what they can do at their homes, how they can teach their kids to be part of a community, how to take care of a community, and what is important. Because the main thing we always strive for at each lesson, at each grade level, is when we're outdoors with the program, and they're going around to their different stages to do different experiments, and always there's one on human impact. What is the erosion here? You know, how did the erosion happen? What is going on in this area? And see the trees for the ground system. In the 4th grade, where all the paved, how do the houses and the paved roads affect water getting into the groundwater system? So they're learning, and we ask them, and we're challenging them to remember. That's hard, because when you ask the kids, what do you remember about River Lab, they remember the outdoor stuff when you really get down to it. And we want them to remember when they become adults, how can they protect or see what is out there that they can do that will help their communities when they grow older. And that is our goal in all of this, is to, like we said, to teach, give everybody, old or young, and understanding of what's going on in our communities, in our river basin system, and how to protect it, and what to do and what not to do, and even little things.
Well, thank you very much for the update today.
Yes.
I know I'm jealous because you started this program after I was out of elementary school, so I'm
Yes,
kind of
they did,
bummed
didn't
out.
they?
But let me turn to my colleague.
check the math on that.
Any comments or questions?
Well, he was out of high school too, because you're friends with Linda Christie.
Yes.
And so,
No, when
you
you
for that.
started, I was in high school,
yeah,
but far out of elementary school.
right.
All right. Kevin, do you have any
Just quick-
thoughts?
Oh, thank you very much for the update. Your programs are phenomenal. You know, our family's been involved over the years, and, you know, the feedback is always positive. And the kids still today, years later, will talk about things because they remember what they learned
Good.
about how to protect the basins and about what they learned in their classes and their programs. So it's a lesson that stays with them for a very long time and leads to them being more aware of their environment.
Really glad to hear that,
Yeah.
because sometimes when I talk to high school students, middle grade, yeah, do you remember River Lab? So it's really good to
No.
hear.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Kristen,
that.
any comments on your side?
I would like to thank you also, having been a river guide myself briefly
Yes.
with the sixth grade trip. I know the value of that program, and again, as I said, with the Audubon, that hands-on learning in the outdoors and making that classroom learning real. What has always struck me about both the Audubon and your program, Mill River, is the coordination with our science curriculum and
Yes.
the partnership with the Board of Education and our schools. I think it is a critical component, a significant component of our science education here in town. And it makes sense because this is where we live, and we're learning about how to take care of literally where we live and our impact.
Yeah.
I also will give you a chance to do a commercial. I think the garden,
What-
the sale in the
We're not
spring-
quite sure what we're doing with that one yet. We're
Okay,
trying to get
so
somebody
that
to
has-
help
that
run
has
it.
been a big
Yeah, I
thing
know.
for you
It
all,
has
so.
been. It's been a really
But
big.
it really
it's-
is an amazing organization in terms
Yes.
of volunteerism. It's another great example of how we partner together as a town and a community, so thank you.
Yeah.
Kristen, thank you. And thank you very much for joining us today and giving us your update.
Yes, and I wanted to give you our annual report.
All right.
Okay, good.
In case you didn't have one.
Thank you.
thank
608
you.
volunteers. That is incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
I
of
would
that-
never would have guessed.
And of that 608, 140 something were, you'll see that in there, were experienced guides who had done that level before
And
and
come back.
did that level again for that next year.
Well,
So
thank you so much
it's-
again.
it's- yeah.
That's
And
phenomenal.
also, we had 42 AP students this last year.
Very good.
Sixth grade, and 5 AHS students, so.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
All right, moving on to item 8 on our agenda from the Director of Public Works. To hear, consider and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Resolved that First Selectman Michael C. Tetra be and hereby is authorized to execute all documents necessary in conjunction with the right-of-way agreement entitled Agreement between the State of Connecticut and the Town of Fairfield for right-of-way activities in conjunction with the replacement of the Valley Road Bridge. This is bridge number 04956 over the Horse Tavern Brook. State project number 50-216 and federal project number 6050, paren 011, close paren. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Hurley, can you give us some
Okay.
background?
Sure. Good afternoon, Selectmen. I'm Bill Hurley, the Fairfield Engineering Manager. Today, I'm here on behalf of DPW and Engineering to present or answer any questions regarding the proposed resolution to authorize the First Selectman to sign the right-of-way agreement between the town and the state of Connecticut in conjunction with the Valley Road Bridge. The right-of-way agreement allows the state to undertake all the right-of-way activities, which include, but not limited to, title search, appraisal, negotiation, acquisition of temporary and permanent property rights, land acquisition, and relocation assistance if necessary. The agreement is similar to the typical right-of-way agreements with other DOT and municipal projects. It is estimated that the town's share of this right-of-way process will be $7,500, which will be funded through the Valley Road Bridge Design Account. The amount of the temporary easement is right now estimated at 1,700 square feet and will involve 2 bridge wing walls, which will involve a taking or covering of 360 square feet. So it's, in relative terms, it's not that big of an area, but these would be right pretty much where the water flows, right at the edge of the bridge. And right now, there aren't really any wing walls there, so the wing walls would be necessary to direct the water to go underneath the bridge. So that's where that construction would occur on private property right now, and there would be a taking for that. It is possible that they could work out some agreement with an easement, but usually it would involve taking, because it's an area that they wouldn't be able to use anyway. So, let's see. Unfortunately, each main phase of the project will require resolutions. You've already had done one resolution for the preliminary design. And upcoming phases are for final design, construction, and inspection, which are still to come. Currently, the bridge is in between the preliminary and the semi-final design phase, in which we still have to go to wetlands for a public hearing, and we have in the scope of services to still have at least one main meeting with the consultant and the neighborhood, and obviously the town would probably have a couple more as well. And that would be pending for the fall. The last 6 months have been kind of slow on, but it's the state process. It's nobody's fault. It's that it's still stuck in that preliminary to semi-final design phase. Let's see. Oh, all right. I'll just say that I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, I might just lead with a couple of
Please,
questions for
please.
clarification's sake. When you say right away and you use the word taking, can you tell us what that really means?
As I was trying to say before, if in the construction of the bridge, they'll be building these wing walls. And a matter of fact, I do have a copy of the preliminary plans. I apologize to Fair TV. I don't know if you can zoom on these. I don't have the boards. So I'll flip it over this way.
And just move the name thing out of the way. there.
May I
This
ask
is
you a question?
the
Are
actual-
these the same plans that were presented back?
I believe they are, because it says preliminary design
Okay.
review. And this area, this is the bridge right here, and the temporary area would be right in here. And that would be for any work in the river that the environmental permits might require, and, as I said, the construction of the bridge and these wing walls. What you see here, these 2 wing walls right here, they would be about the size of this table, maybe a little bit bigger, and there'd be 2 of them on either side, and that's what would be, quote, constructed on the private property. Basically, the edge of the bridge or the back of the sidewalk that's there now, it's a decorative wall that's there now, that would be the actual edge of the property line, so that if we go into the river to do anything, as I said, whether it's environmental or for doing these wing walls, to direct the water to go underneath the bridge, that's on private property. We
Okay.
don't have the right of way for that.
Okay, so when you say taking, we're basically going to build these on private property, and then we will own the private property after that, and the private property owner will no longer have access to that?
Well, right, and only for these 2 little wing walls, which I don't think after we construct them, I don't think the property owner would want them. If we were doing this in-house without federal money or whatever, we'd probably have some sort of agreement where basically they would still be on their property. It wouldn't be a taking, but then we would sign an agreement to maintain.
Okay, given we're doing the taking, is there a formal action by which we do that, and when does that happen?
Well, by signing the resolution, that would start the process. And that process is very detailed, like I was saying before. To meet the federal guidelines, you have to do, the state would actually hire appraisals. They'd do, typically, I think there's 3 of them. They'd come back, they'd negotiate, and they'd come to a fair agreement.
So have the residents been notified yet?
They have been notified. Right now, they are out of country, but they have been notified. I contacted them via email. I gave them a synopsis of the meeting that we've had. They certainly have my name and number. And as I said, the last 6 months, there really hasn't been anything going on with the project outside of developing the final scope for the final design of this, which we're very close to getting that hammered out. And then now the bridge will continue, assuming that this resolution passes. The state would start their process, and concurrently, the town would start their process in obtaining the wetlands permit and continuing on the design.
And even though it's a state project, it's the town that is doing the taking on this case, or is it the state?
Well, no, actually, the resolution would give the state the exact wording in the agreement. I don't want to misrepresent. You might have it on the back of my sheet as well. Let me see if I wrote it here. No. There it is. Basically, the state, the town, the municipality, here it is. Municipality, it's on page 2 if you have the agreement. It says, whereas the municipality has requested that the state undertake all rights-of-way activities. So basically, we're requesting that the state take the right-of-way activities.
Well, it says land acquisition, so we're basically saying that we're requesting the state to go ahead with a land acquisition.
That would,
We're basically, so it's still the state that's going to take that action to acquire the land?
right, but we have to be in a full cooperation, we have to be in a cooperation with that. And again, the state, they use different words. I mean, in the town, we wouldn't quite use the word, I mean, taking sounds like you're taking it without any negotiation, without any dialogue or anything like that.
So there will be some compensation paid?
Oh, yeah, there will be for that. They do have the right to waive that compensation. We've actually had some residents do that. And what certainly we can do is we can act as like a mediator in that process. And certainly if the property owner feels that the state's being either too harsh or whatever, we can try to, arrange a meeting. We've done that in the past with other, what I'd call quote takings.
Well, go right ahead.
Bill, thanks. Is it just one property owner, or are there more than one that own this particular, that touch this piece of land?
No, it's just the one.
It's just the one property owner, and you've had contact with them. Do you have any initial feedback from them, positive or negative?
They seem to be in general positive about it. They realize the bridge has to be replaced. They have some typical concerns, but they're not unlike any other people's concerns. And aesthetics being one of them. And they have stressed that that we, meaning the town, keep them informed. And I said I would do that. I would personally do that on this project. I would make sure that they're fully informed of what's going on.
All right, so what I'm hearing is you've contacted them, and they've had some initial normal-type questions.
Right.
But you haven't run up against any blatant opposition to what you're doing project-wise or with this piece of land, at least to this point?
Right, that's correct. And again, not to paraphrase or try to read someone's mind, but it is
Agreed.
a rather large parcel. This is an area immediately next to the bridge. And so I don't think it's going to deter, in other words, we're not really taking away a vital section or someplace near the house of the residents.
Right.
That makes a little bit of a difference,
Right,
too.
and I wasn't expecting you to be able to speak for them. I was just asking in case you
Yeah.
had heard any strong opposition to date.
No.
And once again, this agreement basically, the way I understand it, allows, by us executing this agreement then allows the state to go negotiate with the resident on the piece of land, restrictions, pricing, things of that nature. So we're kind of out of that mix unless we get pulled into it because there's questions that we can add value to.
Correct. Now, there is, I wasn't going to get into it, but in, just so happens concurrently, the state also has a master municipal agreement for rights-of-way projects, so you don't have to go through this every single time. And in this agreement, which again is typical for all of them, they basically give the town a choice of two things. One is that the town perform the right-of-way activities, or have the state do them. In the past, because of, they're used to doing this process, they do probably hundreds, if not thousands of them a year. It takes a lot of manpower. There's a lot of research involved. It's very time-consuming. And cost-wise, the town share is 20%. So if we were to do it, meaning the town were to do it, according to this new agreement coming up, which, as I said, is similar to what they've done in the past, the town would have to incur all the costs up front, then they would get reimbursed by the state, and we know that is a long process. There's not a guarantee that we would get all of it, and there's other issues that way. So being that I've been with the town now about 24 years, and this is probably at least, I think, our dozen, or 12th bridge project, this is usually the better way to go, is to have the state do it.
And,
Kristen, do you have any?
Just a few things. First of all, thank you, Mr. Hurley, for this. As you know, I attended that informational meeting with the residents, and we had a conversation earlier today about communication with the neighbors, and I thank you for facilitating that and look forward to that in the future. The one thing that I wanted to just ask for the public's sake, and I think there will be people who will probably watch this meeting and gather information. You talked about the state of the project and final scope and final design. For the lay people out there, could you just describe the difference in terms of that piece of it? So finalizing scope and then final design.
Well, the preliminary design is what was presented to the public at the public informational meeting. From there, they incorporate those comments. They incorporate comments that the state had provided, and they revise or tweak the design. The step from preliminary to semifinal or final would also mean that they have to now do a presentation to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse and possibly the DEP and Army Corps of Engineers as well. We basically call it the environmental permitting, and they may have some additional requirements, so that would also get incorporated into the design. The public obviously has the right to attend that meeting, and then we'd also would hold at least one official meeting, and I'm figuring there's probably going to be 2 or 3, what I'd call neighborhood meetings, to update the public. And regarding, even from that previous public meeting, we definitely find out with the state when the public is involved, and they've shown that they care about the bridge, that aesthetics is important in this case. We had, I think, just shy of 40 people show up for that public meeting. We were able to get, I'll call them the gray areas, where the state could go either way on some of the requirements, and we've gotten them more, favorably to the town side or to the neighborhood side. So the public process has definitely, in my opinion, helped in terms of the design of the bridge, and we would definitely update the neighborhood on that.
That's great, and I think that exactly being able to keep the neighborhood, especially key neighborhood leaders, informed so that people can continue to engage in the process and understand. So I thank you for that.
Well, if you don't, and again, I apologize in that I haven't been updating the neighborhood, but the last 6 months, it's just been a slow process, and there really hasn't been any change. as we're negotiating the final scope of services. And when that gets in and, from this right-of-way, then the design will pick up again. So that's
My
the reason
other-
why they haven't really heard from me.
Right, right. That's, sounds like it. So the other question I had is about the agreement itself. If we take no action or for some reason, and I'm not suggesting that we are, oppose this agreement, is the project able to move forward without it?
My quick response would be no.
Okay.
It's necessary for the design. The only other way would be is then if the town were to take, and do it on our own and go with that right-of-way process. I have a chart here just to remind people, you can pass it around or whatever, but this is the federal local bridge design process it's a flow chart with about 30 boxes on here, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Just
So-
one other, just to follow up on that, will this be going to the RTM as well?
Right, and talking to Bob Mayer, it does not have to go, because we're taking the money out of the design portion of the project right now. So it does not require any additional funding, so it would not have to go. Other phases will, though. I want to make that, the other phases when we go,
Right.
they'll have to go.
Okay.
Because right now, we only funded the one small portion, so.
Right.
Mr. Kyle?
Back to your flow chart,
Sure.
which these concrete aprons, as you call them, right? Is that what you call them?
Wing walls. Wing walls.
The wing walls.
Mhm.
Now, would these have been designed or known about at the earliest level of design for the project? Or are those a recent addition to a plan?
In the very preliminary, most bridges have wing walls to them. The ones that don't, the ones that were built maybe in the 30s, so that's where we're finding the scour issues
Sure,
or
sure.
some of the other issues.
Right.
So the answer would be, yes, they would be known. Now, again, from preliminary to final, that's where maybe the neighbor has some input, possibly, where, can they, go 45 or 30 degrees or something like that, that there might be some dialogue on, and the hydraulic studies may also show that you have some flexibility, or no, they have to go here in order to have the bridge convey the water underneath.
Which gets me to my question, thank you. Along this process timeline, which I haven't seen, is it normal to be looking at this piece of it now, discussing things with the landowner, the homeowner now, or is that something that we should have thought about doing earlier in the process at, one of these earlier stages?
Well, if you looked on the box, we're pretty much on schedule on that, and the other thing is that
I guess to further clarify. Go.
the date that the agreement we had to wait for an agreement from the state.
Okay.
The first selectman's office received this May 27th, 2014. So, in other words, the state had just given us this.
Okay.
So, it hasn't been like sitting on our desk for 6 months.
So it's not like we've missed a window of opportunity to meet with the homeowner and discuss these issues or come to closure on any of them?
Oh, no, we haven't missed any window at all.
Okay.
And being that the permit process typically takes, say, 3 months for the inland wetlands, and some of the other design things and holding the public meetings and all that, I estimate real quick, and that's why I said at least in the fall, we would meet with them again. So let's just say there's a 6-month process, and the right-of-way could take 3 to 6 months, so we're in that time frame. If it were to be something where they were totally against the project and there was a big gap in negotiations, then that could drag the project a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Kristen?
Just to follow up, I guess, as a kind of follow-on comment to Selectman Kiley's, when you presented this in November, it was, the meeting that was held at Stratfield School, that was part of my question earlier, Selectman Kiley, was about those wing walls. And
Right.
I recall that at that time, Mr. Hurley had talked with the neighbors. Those neighbors were not actually present at the meeting. Again, I think they were not available. but there had been conversation that night then about this process and about those neighbors and the potential of this action occurring.
Okay.
So that's, I just want to give some credit to
thanks.
Bill,
Great.
because it has been a conversation.
But another
that
thing
was
too
also
is,
talked about in the neighborhood.
being that there's only the one neighbor involved, or
Right.
one property owner involved, and I knew they were not in attendance,
Right.
we didn't dwell upon it at the public
Okay.
hearing. But they
Was
did
noted.
let me know that they had a, what I'd call representative or a family friend that was
Okay.
at that meeting. I did talk to them very briefly of what may occur, and they said they would, report it back to the.
Okay,
to the,
and thank you for that update, that does help a lot. And can I assume that some of those comments that went back and forth were specific to, these walls potentially being built?
With the representative, it was just the fact that there might be some temporary or permanent.
Okay.
I prefer to call it permanent easements, but as I said, they use that other word. And they are aware of that. It might be necessary for the construction of the bridge.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any
That's
further
it for
comments?
me.
No.
All right. Mr. Hurley, just to clarify again, it looks like according to page 4 here that item 7, that once the construction is done, the property rights would actually move from the state to the town.
That's purposes to the municipality, that's correct.
Okay.
Basically, they're doing our legwork, so to speak, in the right-of-way process. It would be a town bridge still.
And again, there's no cost to the town, or no incremental cost to the town, I guess I should say, because the money has already been approved and has already been set aside for this. So there's no increase in funding necessary for this.
That would be correct at this time.
All right. Unless, okay to go to the public?
Sure.
Any questions from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Mr. Hurley, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, next up, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Fair TV Operational Committee. Whereas the Fair TV Operational Committee intends to seek grant funding from the Cable Advisory Council Area 2 for the support of educational programming, and whereas the Fair TV Operational Committee intends to seek grant funding for the Cable Advisory Council Area 2 for the support of government programming, now therefore be it resolved that in accordance with a request from the Fair TV Operational Committee, the first selectman be and hereby is authorized to approve applications to the Cable Advisory Committee, Cable Advisory Council Area 2 for the support of education and government programming, to execute any documents necessary to facilitate the town's participation in said grants, and to administer any grant funds provided in connection herewith. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
As second.
Second.
All right, I see Mr. Kennelly's here. Did you want to add
Explain
any?
very briefly what those two actions are.
Briefly would be good.
2 minutes. Those two, for the record, Jim Kennelly, Chairman of the Fair TV Operational Committee. The two actions are simply that there's a letter required by the CAC from Mike's office, from the First Selectman's office, acknowledging that the Fair TV Operational Committee is the entity that can seek the grant each year, and he provides that letter. Secondly, then when the grant is awarded, it is awarded through the First Selectman's office, and that those funds then are distributed to the specific accounts that have been set up by finance for those dollars to be trackable, so to speak, because CSC2 actually awards its grants to our two individual entities, sub-entities, Fair TV Education and Fair TV Government, and that's why we need this resolution. Okay?
And just to clarify, this is something that's been done every year?
Yeah, since the process began in 2008, each year of the last 6 years, that's what we've done. So that's it.
Now, the one difference perhaps this year
Yes.
is because there was some question as to whether this funding would be available. The town went ahead and put the full amount into the budget
Right, but just to explain what's going on is, there's less than in other words, normally there's $100,000 of the $700,000 that is raised from subscribers from Cablevision of Southern Connecticut that goes to the 4 towns that split it up under the legislation, and we usually get a quarter of that, about 25 grand. Already 8,000 of that is gone. That was spent on legal expenses, fighting a legal challenge by Soundview Community Media to essentially say that the Cable Advisory Council of Area 2 didn't have the legal authority to distribute funds, and that therefore, and other issues. The remaining $92,000 that is left was held until now, and normally we would have received the grant process is basically about 6 months behind. So there will be a smaller pot of funds, and consequently, we've trimmed our sales in terms of what we'll be, asking for, understanding that the entire group of 4 will have to reflect the lesser pot to begin with, which is nearly 10% lower. Okay.
So where I was trying to get to is that any funding that comes out of this will be used to reduce the town's commitment on that side, correct?
That's not what we under the understanding of. My understanding is that the RTM funded fully the $49,500 to operate Fair TV's primary schedule and some very limited secondary schedule, and the Fair TV on-demand service. What the application that the Fair TV Operational Committee had anticipated voting on July 16th meeting was to seek dollars for the ability to allow dynamic addressing for live broadcast that would allow us to do live broadcasts other than this building and the Board of Education, other buildings like McKinley School, Ward High School, places like that you can't see a live meeting from now. Also to fund the purchase of 2 fixed tape cameras to allow more single camera events to be shot for things like sporting events and special programs and things like that. And there was also a chunk of dollars to be set aside. I think the suggested amount was $5,000 for, or $5,500 for activities that would be in addition to the secondary schedule for the 375th anniversary of the town. That said, if it's, if there's if it's the will of the Board of Selectmen to have us recoup those dollars that way, then, we can put in an application request and for just what was approved by the RTM for the primary and secondary schedules and Fair TV on demand. And, but that's my understanding. We didn't proceed with the idea that we were going to recoup dollars in this year's cycle.
And I didn't mean
No,
to-
no, it's no problem. I'm just saying, it's up to you guys.
Thank
Tell me
you.
what want.
If I could.
Sure.
I didn't mean to speak for the board now, I was just trying to clarify.
Right.
Because I didn't know, I haven't had a presentation, and I don't believe the board has, on what the other options or what this money would be used for.
I mean,
So
right.
I guess that
right.
if I
Sure,
could.
I'm sorry.
The question then becomes, from a board standpoint, do we want to know what the Fair TV is planning for this, so we can, because to make that decision that Mr. Kelly's suggesting, this could be very, very much needed items in terms of expanding the capability for Fair TV versus kind of replacing the dollars that, because if we hadn't heard that the CAC wasn't going to put in this grant, we would only had 25 grand roughly in the budget, and this, somewhere the CAC would have funded as normal. So we're, I don't know if you would have, I don't know if there'd been.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. My
Yeah.
understanding was that the RTM passed the allocation of, like, it was $49,500? No?
Yeah,
Is that not?
if I
Okay,
could, if
sure,
I could
sorry,
finish.
sorry.
All right? The, yes and no, to be simply, all right?
Okay.
Simply put, the amount that was in the budget was going to be the same amount as last year.
Right.
It was right about the end of February, beginning of March, that we heard that the CAC was not going to be making this grant available. So we went back to the budget and added in money
We
to
did.
the Fair TV line. So I believe it was the Board of Selectmen, in fact, that offered that increase in funding. I think so. After the preliminary budget recommendation was put forward, to address that concern and to make sure that Fair TV was available to the town. And I think, Mr. Kelly, I think you spoke at the Board of Finance meeting where
In
we put
February?
that, March probably.
March,
when
but
we
it
put
was
that-
February here.
when we put that forward. So that's what I was trying to clarify. Is this basically suggesting the town doesn't need that money, and you're suggesting, no, this is, the Fair TV committee is looking for some additional capabilities?
Yeah,
That
that's the
if I-
idea.
If I could finish?
Sure.
Use this money for additional capabilities, so they'd keep the $50,000 that the town approved, use this in addition, and if this is basically provided on the same basis, minus the 8% that was already spent on legal fees, this would be roughly
We get about 20,
$22,000?
yeah, we get about, on average, about 25,000 a year from the process. And we really only, because it would look like it was going to be a difficult year for the CAC, we looked mostly for capital dollars in the 15, 16 range. I mean, nothing's finalized. The manager's made some suggestions to us, and there's a vote in July at our next meeting, July 16th, to kind of review and see if it's appropriate. This cycle, which normally would have been over in April, will actually, for the grant process for the CAC, will end July 30th. So we just have to act to let him know what essentially we want to go forward with and send it out.
Good. I'd open up to my colleagues.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Kennelly. And, I think I would have probably asked the same questions as the first selectman in terms of that conversation. I think here at this table, when we voted to add those funds, I don't recall, and I'd have to go back to my notes, having had a specific conversation along the lines of if we do get that grant money, what we then would choose to do or what direction we would take. Other bodies may have had that conversation, but I can't recall that happening here. It sounds like what the committee has done is say, okay, this was approved by the RTM, we know that we can move forward, and now we're surprised or grateful that we have this opportunity and would like to then, take advantage of that opportunity to provide some improvements to what we are capable of doing. So, for me, it's, I think that's a reasonable approach, though I recognize that, again, we didn't really have the conversation here in terms of what expectations we might have as a board if this did happen. I think for my part, at least, I didn't expect that we would be receiving grant funding this year, which is partly why I voted as I did, and I think others as well, to be able to make sure that we were at least providing the service at the level that we have been. So, yeah, I think that it's a fair conversation to have, but that at this point, I think the grant process, I support the grant process moving forward.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kennelly. I certainly support the grant process, and that's good news going forward. And it's, my colleagues' comments pretty much reflect my recollection of what we discussed and why we did what we did at the time, which was, I think at that point, we were kind of, hedging our bets and supplanting the budget a little bit versus supplementing it, which is turning out to be a good thing because we have those funds in place, and we still have the opportunity to go get these funds. So I guess I would suggest that since the field has changed just a little bit, maybe we should get a more detailed presentation on what the plans are. Should there be more money in the bucket that's available to us going forward? It could be very necessary, and it's probably a good thing based on your plans to expand and provide greater services. So maybe we should get a better understanding or presentation on what those plans and expectations are. I realize you just walked through them, but it's the first time hearing it, so
Sure, I'd
I'm
be
not...
glad to provide written materials, and we haven't
Yeah.
finalized anything.
Well,
I just think it's
that's-
the will of,
that too.
really the will of the board,
Yeah.
because we'll be meeting, and our members obviously will probably take a look at this.
Right.
So, I mean, if you, we're not guaranteed any set number out of the 92. So, for example,
Right.
we didn't get 25,000 as an average out of the 100 because we were slotted for that amount. It just happened over the years we got that amount.
Right.
And we actually basically are looking for capital improvements that'll give us some more capability and a little bit more secondary labor money, because we think this 375th anniversary is interesting.
Sure, sure.
But I don't think there's any problem that if you guys said to us, go back and ask for 15,000 or 20,000 back from the grant process, we can. The only, from a policy perspective, I'd say, is at the funding levels Fair TV is at now, about 49,000, you pretty much have guaranteed that you will get the primary schedule of Fair TV from the taxpayer, and that'll be it. And then anything we do beyond that, any kind of secondary work, or any kind of capital improvements we want to make, like for in this example, be able to do more live programming, we'd ask a grant agency for it. Whereas if we go back to where we're splitting the labor cost, for example, which is most of what Fair TV is, with the grant, we always are under the threat of additional lawsuits or other towns coming for grants and us getting less. So, but that's maybe a longer discussion. I'm just saying, you know, we're happy to do what you'd like. That's what I'm saying.
Which makes sense. The other thing is, I just want to have maybe in conjunction with that presentation on what you would use all of these funds collectively for today or the upcoming year, maybe we can get a better understanding of what our baseline is going forward. I mean, is the baseline budget required to run the operation? Is it going to be 50 going forward, or maybe it's 60, or maybe it's 80? That I don't know, but maybe.
Jerry says it's 375,000.
Well,
But I don't know why. Yeah, for some reason.
But it would be.
for
It would be
himself.
It's really about a Lamborghini, but I don't really know. We just, you know.
Yeah,
But seriously.
just to have a
but
global
seriously,
understanding of
absolutely.
what you
And
guys are
I'm happy
doing.
to provide that for you.
I mean, that would help
And
me
I
better
and we didn't mean to overstep, you know, authority or anything like that. We just kind of moved forward with the idea that the town side had funded Fair TV's primary schedule in a tiny sliver, about $750 worth of secondary programming. I think it does like the budget you guys approved is like 2 graduations, 2 award ceremonies, 2 parades. That's about all we can afford. You know, each session is about $125 for extra labor for it, and then the rest is coverage of all the government meetings for the primary schedule. The $3,000 for Fair TV on Demand, you know, the server farm that delivers Fair TV on Demand, and about $500 in incidental expenses like mic cords and things like that.
Okay.
So I'll be glad to, you let me
you.
know if you'd like me to come. We will be reviewing this on the 16th of July, so we'll do it.
Is there any timing issues in terms of what's the? what are
July
the-
30th
what are
is
the
when
key
we have to
dates?
submit it. So in other words, if you would ask us to go back and ask for half, in other words, if you would want us to seek half the dollars of the current budget, which is $49,500, we would have to write an application by July 30th to the CAC2 stating that that's what we wish to do with the dollars. If you allow us to remain with spending the $49,500 allocated by the town for the primary schedule, the Fair TV on Demand, and the incidentals, then we would go ahead with a request of probably in the $16,000 range for the 2 cameras, additional live boxes and setups, and a little bit of money for shooting some more 375th anniversary stuff later this year.
And wanted to make sure you get your approval on a timely basis, so nothing gets held up.
Right.
Your meeting is July,
July 16th,
right, and
and the deadline is July 30th.
I believe the Board of Selectmen meeting is July 16th also.
We have one right in that zone. The first is.
Well, we're happy to move ours back, you know, if we have to.
Any chance to move that up just even?
I mean, like, do you want it, in other words, would you prefer us to hold our meeting until I've given a presentation and you've decided whether you think what we're at? In other words, you'll kind of have to make a cost-value judgment, it seems. Do you feel that it is worthwhile to the taxpayer about the plan we're asking for? Do you think the live capability at the multiple schools? Do you think the additional dollars for the 375th anniversary labor cost? And the 2 cameras for these fixed shoots we're talking about where we could just go do sports. You can't bring a big TriCaster box out to the bleachers at Ward High School. So I don't want to get too far down the road here. But my point is just, it might be better for you to have either a written report for you to go off of to decide if you think that's worthy of that, or to say, hey, that's a luxury, go ahead and just ask for more dollars back from the taxpayers and we can do that. But once we have that direction, that can be noted when we actually meet to adopt what our application will
Well,
be.
see, one of
So
the-
we can meet after or we can meet before, but I think meeting after you might be better,
Yeah, thank you.
so we have direction.
Thank you.
Sorry.
One of the challenges, I think, is that these dollars were approved both by the Board of Finance and by the RTM. And one of the questions is, do we get feedback from them as to what we're looking for? And what their expectation was. Because I think Mr. Kennelly's raising very good points in terms of what was the expectation,
Yeah.
and where do we want to go with this?
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do we get some feedback from them without impacting the timing necessarily?
I think that's important because we were all in that vote process together, and I think we all, for the most part, had access to the same level of information and why we were doing something a little bit ahead of where we normally would have done it, or at least in the amounts. So I think it makes sense to temporarily hold on this, get that information, put these meetings together, but to your point, I think it makes sense to also get some input from, Mr. Flynn or the Board of Finance or the
Well,
RTM.
then potentially then, if Mr. Cannell, if the Fair TV Commission can kind of give us their proposal in terms of what they're going to do,
Yeah.
then we have a chance to circulate that, so everybody's on the same page, so it's not left to us describing something.
That's fine.
I think that's,
That we're getting your words to describe to the boards what the plan is,
right.
so to get some feedback.
So that would mean them meeting ahead of us, not behind us, so that we would
Well-
get your input and
Well,
proposal?
we
or-
have a
if
proposal
they draft
that's
it.
going, we have a draft proposal from the system manager
Okay.
for this, that we're going to be considering as part of his manager's report
Okay.
we get prior to our meetings each month.
Oh, so we,
So we could get you a copy of that, and then
We
you'll
can
make the
circulate.
cost-value judgment,
Okay.
essentially, and you can give us some direction if you'd like.
beautiful.
Is that okay?
That would work.
Would
That works for me.
Okay.
And we're in no rush to get this resolution done. We don't need it until July 30th. All we need is that, all this is really doing is authorizing the first selectman to sign off that, yet again, Fair TV is the entity receiving.
Yeah, I think the sense of urgency is the lack of meetings, and if there's anybody else
Right.
that has to be included, the lack of other meetings. So I think we've
Got
got
it.
two, so we can do it. I
Yeah.
don't think that's an issue.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, great, thanks so much.
Mr.
All
Kelly,
right.
thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
This is, actually, this isn't for Mr. Canelli, this is just this conversation at the table. I appreciate that, which is partly why I phrased my comments as I did, that at our table, when we had our discussion, and I don't recall the sense of the conversation with the other bodies, my concern about, which I think the idea of reaching out to the other bodies is great. It's hard in terms of a timeline issue. Is that going to be part of a public meeting and public conversation, or are we, just from a process standpoint, that's my question. As you pointed out, the issue of the timing and the meeting schedule.
Okay.
So,
Well, I think at this moment, the best thing we can do is postpone this item number 9 and then item number 10 to a date certain, that being our second meeting in the month of July, which is probably the 15th or something along those.
Post, oh, excuse, Mr. Kelly, please.
Sorry.
Postponing item number 9 makes sense to the next date certain, the next Board of Selectmen meeting. And then we
Okay.
can either deal with it then or postpone it again based on
Okay,
how things
that's
work.
fine.
Number 10 is somewhat independent, and we can't postpone
Oh,
postpone
okay.
that whenever we want.
That's-
but
that's the-
We don't need to postpone that.
the
We can
charge,
actually
okay.
move on that.
That makes sense.
Because the item there would be, well, why don't we,
Okay, so,
just quickly, the item there is, we can take that, and basically, the motion will be to extend the time of the termination date for the committee to 12/31,
I think that's great.
so that, so these are two independent motions in that regard.
Okay, so that said, I move to postpone item number 9 to a date certain, and that day being the next Board of Selectmen meeting,
All right, is there a second?
second,
July 2nd.
All right, any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Any comments from the public on the motion to postpone? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then just as follow, Mr. Kennelly, if you can get that to me, I'll get that to my colleagues, and we'll get that out. And Kristen, I think to your point, we'll run it by a number of folks. If there's significant questions raised by the Board of Finance or the RTM, we may have to come up with a more formal process. If there's not, we'll see what happens, but we'll take it one step at a time. All right. Next item up is item 10, Fair TV Operational Committee, to review and modify the Fair TV Operational Committee charge revised by the Board of Selectmen on June 19th, 2013. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, the item before us, and as I mentioned, the intent of bringing this back is this is a temporary committee, and the members on this committee serve for the duration of the committee. And it says on the charge that it will terminate on June 30th, 2014. So the thought was, we're looking for a motion to let this get through the RTM process. There is an ordinance that's being presented by Mr. Kennelly and two sponsors
Right.
to form the Fair TV Committee charge into an ordinance. So I think if we extend this to, as I understand it, from Mr. Kennelly, if we can extend this through 12/31, that should provide enough time.
Sure,
So
that makes sense.
would anyone like to make a motion to amend
Sure.
this to 12/31/2014?
Sure. I move to amend item 10 to delete June 19, 2013, and to replace that language.
Not
It has to
amend the
cover
charge.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong,
In this case, the last line of the charge.
the last line of the charge, right. On the charge itself, excuse me, at the bottom of the charge, to amend the date, June 30th, 2014, to December 31st of 2014.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Back to the board. Ready to vote? And this is the amendment only. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, then I think we may have to pass the revised, we might have, I think to be safe, pass the revised charge again. We have a motion to accept the revised charge.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the revised charge as it's amended? Any comments from the public on the revised charge as it's amended? Back to the board, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the charge has been amended.
Right.
I need a minute.
You want to take a break?
To run out yet.
Okay. We're going to have a brief pause and come back in session in 5 minutes. All right, thank you. Next up, we have review and approval of the department head compensation for fiscal year 2015. I have a motion to accept,
So moved.
a second.
Second.
Just by way of description, this is the second year we've used this approach. And the department head salaries, per our town charter, need to be approved by the Board of Selectmen. We had discussed last year, and the approach we're taking this year is consistent with that I would prepare a schedule with recommended increases for each department head for the board. This board could do one of two things at that point: either approve the recommendations as presented, or if there are any specific people that were in question, we could separate those off and deal with those at those individuals at a second session, where we'd have notify the department head, have a private executive session, have the ability to discuss any specifics within that. So with that as an intro, what you have before you is kind of two documents. One document that shows the department head, job class, what the fiscal 14 salary was, what the recommended fiscal 15 salary is. Last year we had several longevity increases that were included. This year there is only one for town librarian Karen Ronald. And then in the final column to your right, you can see what the fiscal 15 salary would be, including, in Ms. Ronald's case, the longevity. You've also have included last year's spreadsheet done in similar fashion for a comparison between the two. I should point out there is one, what I'm going to call it, administrative adjustment that was made to Mr. Sands Cleary last year. The 3% additional longevity that he was given on the spreadsheet as presented last year was calculated on his salary prior to the salary adjustment. So in looking at the two sheets, you'll notice a
okay.
slight difference. The other two were caught and adjusted. Ms. Ronalds has been adjusted ahead of time based on her recommended salary, so we won't have that glitch in the future if this is proposed as recommended.
Okay.
But I did want to explain, and that's why you can see it's about a $200 difference. It's just the difference in the adjustment amount.
Right. So just on that, so I'm clear, so if in a given year, somebody has both a percentage performance raise and an escalator for longevity, you would calculate in the performance percentage first and then do the longevity calculation on top of that?
That's how it was explained to me by Human Resources today when I went through the, how did we get into that situation?
And it's a small number, it's a couple $100. Okay,
Yep.
I got it.
All right. Any further questions or discussion?
No.
Right here. All right. Any comments from the public? All right, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, thank you. Well, I should point out, just by way of description, one of the things that, with Tom Dabrowski now in place at Chief of Staff, one of the things I've asked him to do is work with the department heads on goals and objectives as we go through the year. One of the things I'd like to see us get to, and I don't know if we can do it this year, but what I'd like to see us get to is, say in the budget book, rather than having just a kind of year in, year out, same description of we're DPW, we plow snow, we pave roads, that type of thing, to actually start getting more of the goals and objectives in, and at some point start to including more of the measures in. We've had some talks, I know, among this board and other boards about metrics and how we measure by department. And I'd like to see the budget book on a year-to-year basis be something that includes what those goals and objectives are. So in essence, we're getting back to seeing what we're funding, what we're paying for, what improvements we expect to see in each area. So it, and that will kind of ripple back into both the performance reviews as we do those, and it's one of the things I've charged Mr. Dabrowski with, and he's been a great help in getting the foundation for that laid, and we're starting to build on that. So I hope that we can get those changes in place sooner rather than later, but you should see progress along those lines each year going forward. All right. Next item up is the tax collector. Yeah, most we do, okay. To consider and act upon tax refunds as recommended by the tax collector in the amount recommended. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All in favor?
Oh, I have an amendment.
Oh, that's right. Go ahead.
I'd like to amend, just adding at the end of the sentence, the amount $7,942.69.
All right.
Second.
All right. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
All right. The motion as amended stands before us. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Next up, an item to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.